Buildings are a major source of our greenhouse gas emissions and account for almost 40% of energy use in the United States. It's a whopping amount. And, buildings often aren't included in discussions like this, and they should be, because greenhouse gas emissions and the efficiency of buildings, they really matter. Our energy consumption and how we make it more efficient are the top of mind for our next two experts. Donnel Baird is the founder and CEO of BlocPower, a really cool company, a Brooklyn-based startup that finances and installs clean energy in low-income buildings across the city. I want to tell everybody his Twitter account is turning buildings into Teslas. It's really a cool Twitter handle, so follow him. And Mary Ann Piette is a senior scientist at Berkeley National Laboratory, where her work focuses on efficient energy-using technologies, buildings, and grid integration. Welcome, Donnel and Mary Ann. It's great to have you both here. Donnel, let me just start with you. I mean, where did your obsession start with turning buildings into Teslas? And just take us a couple of notches into that so folks know what I'm talking about.
Well, the technology exists today to turn a building into a Tesla. So what we mean by that is Tesla is taking out the fossil fuel engine out of an automobile and replacing it with an internet-connected, smart, computationally enabled all-electric engine. And we can do the same things for buildings. So instead of heating and cooling our buildings and our hot water systems in buildings with fossil fuels, with oil and gas, we can replace those oil and gas-based systems with all-electric, smart, computationally enabled all-electric systems. And so that's what we want people to do, is turn their building into a Tesla. The White House infrastructure plan commits to doing this for 2 million buildings, to electrify 2 million buildings across America, which we think is amazing. And I got obsessed with this, I think, from when I was a kid. I grew up in a building. It didn't have a functioning heating system. And so we used to heat our apartment with our oven. And so I was exposed early on to the challenges that occur when you don't have a modern heating or cooling system in your home. And it just turns out that heating and cooling systems are terrible for the planet and responsible for, 30%, 40% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions.
I mean, I want to tell our audience, Donnel, that you've already, my information does, you've already upgraded with clean energy to 1,100 buildings, low-income buildings across New York. Just big. I know you're talking about 2 million buildings, but I'm impressed with what you've done. But before I jump to Mary Ann, I want to ask you something, and I may have this wrong, and I apologize to everybody out there. Sometimes I ask bad questions that are uninformed. But I've spent a lot of time in Japan and in Korea, a lot of time in Europe, and it always seemed to me that the kind of technologies we're talking about, at least some of them, were more embedded in across the board, lights that would automatically go off, heating systems that seem to be sensible, water management, electricity. So if my impression is correct, why has America been so poor, in my view, or it lags behind that, embedding these things as a natural part of home building and home maintenance? Tough question. I mean, but you're correct, 100%. These technologies are highly prevalent in Europe, particularly Western Europe. We are working with Japanese manufacturers. There's several of them that have a competitive global market advantage and produce the best building electrification equipment in the world. And so we partner with them. We'd love to see more American manufacturers focusing on this, but to date, they haven't seen the market. And there's something in our culture. There's I don't know if it's our frontier mindset or whatever it is, but there's something in our culture that makes us feel more comfortable. We have a sense of comfort that is associated with the overconsumption of energy. So it's a privilege, but now it's our burden because we have to mitigate and address this waste of fossil fuel energy that's deeply embedded in the structure of our economy across construction, architecture, mechanical engineering, manufacturing. All of these industries are going to have to rapidly transform so that we can catch up. And what's exciting about the Biden infrastructure plan is it gives America the opportunity to not only catch up, but to surpass and take the mantle of global leadership in many of these industries.
Thank you. Well, Mary Ann, one of my obsessions when I worked in the U.S. Senate, a long time ago, were our Department of Energy national laboratories, the weapons laboratories, the other DOE labs, of which Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory is one of these, great laboratories, great centers, where you can just think without gravity about, various challenges we have. So I'm fascinated, and I'm pleased actually that that you are looking into some of these questions about efficiency, but also innovation in this space. What can you share with our audience are the coolest things you're working on?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here today. I'm going to mention two, and I'm going to start by talking a little about the question you asked about why our building stock is not quite up to par compared to other countries. A lot of that is first costs. So we don't take a life cycle cost perspective, and we need to do that more. And the other one is speculative construction. So we build buildings and sell them. And one of the things that's super exciting is something called the thin triple window. The thin triple was actually patented 30 years ago, and we're now able to manufacture it. And it's a triple pane window that is much better than a single pane. And we can put it into those buildings so that heating and cooling, not only in cold climates, but also in hot climates, the thin triple can fit in the space of an existing single pane and double pane window. So it's thinner. And it has a really thin piece of glass in the middle. And it's been supported by the US Department of Energy. And there's a number of manufacturers that are selling that technology. So energy efficient facade, that will help the things that BlocPower is doing. And we really care about making a better envelope and making sure that the heat doesn't leak out and sealing the building really well. So that's one thing I want to mention is that thin triple window. The second one is grid interactive efficient buildings. So another thing about when we electrify heating and cooling and try to have cleaner buildings is we need to make sure we understand how to integrate the electric loads in those buildings with a changing power supply. We have more renewables, and the renewables are variable. So we have intermittent supply, and we want to have flexible demand. So we can try to use up more of that clean energy when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing and store it and help reduce the peaks that happen at other times of the day. And that requires a lot of new controls and sensing, a lot of interoperability, and partnering with utilities and building owners and companies around the country to help facilitate clean, efficient, affordable, and reliable buildings.
So you're developing these technologies, Mary Ann, you're exploring. You're not, I would think, subject to the same kind of P&L that many private sector. How does that technology get from your lab into the private sector?
Yeah, we work on science projects where we work on actually developing new technologies as well as field demonstrations. So we partner with manufacturers, a lot of work with utilities, and doing field trials where we'll try something in the lab and then bring it out into the market, and then work on the incentive structures and trying to help building owners understand the value proposition. One of the examples is something called the Smart Energy Analytics Campaign, where we've been working on energy management and information system technology for facility managers, and we'll work with grocery store chains, big box retail, real estate investment trusts, university campuses, school districts. So we try to study what's working in the field and tell the story for different building owners and operators and managers about the investment opportunities where they will actually save money and help the planet.
That's fascinating. Donnel, in your work, as you get more and more profile and you expand this, how do I put this? Are there resources that become easier to do it over time? Is it a function of philanthropy, or are there business interests where, gravity is helping to take you the right direction? In other words, do you have to go out and raise donations to do what you're doing, or is there another economic model that is going to help you get greater scale in transforming these buildings to more efficient energy use?
Well, the reason we're going to build a $20 billion company that helps to solve climate change is because we have a profitable economic model that's scalable in the very traditional sense of venture capital-backed technology firms. So we don't rely on philanthropy. We have some of the very best venture capital investors in the world. Andreessen Horowitz, who are early investors in Twitter and Airbnb and Facebook and Lyft. They just had a big IPO yesterday with Coinbase, which they were an early investor in. Kport Capital, which invested in Uber's seed round and made $400 million of profit. These are our lead investors. Goldman Sachs is another one of our most important investors. So we believe that it's important to rely on the technical breakthroughs and innovations that Dr. Mary Ann and her team helped to develop in the federal government. And as those technologies become commercializable, we want to be at the forefront of helping regular Americans to access cutting edge technology that's going to reduce their fossil fuel waste. There's 127 million buildings. If you install all electric heating and cooling equipment in 100 million buildings, that's several $1 trillion worth of economic value. And so our business model is to try and capture that value. We love philanthropy, but it doesn't move at the speed and scale. There's no philanthropist that has $1 trillion to give away. So what has to happen is we have to create an industry that can, create several $1 trillion of economic activity. And that's exactly what BlocPower is doing.
Thank you. Mary Ann, one of the other obsessions I have, besides, the fact that building should be part of this equation, is funding science research. And, I don't know how Livermore is, Berkeley Lab is funded through DOE or National Science Foundation, but one of my things has been looking at, to be quite honest, it was like the Europe question or Asia question. You look at renewables, you look at, this has become a global scene. China has become a real leader in a lot of this. Japan has been as well. But you look at other countries that have been investing, and some of it's in national security, some of it's in dual use arenas. And I've been worried that America was lagging a bit, and that, when in Washington, the subject of competing with China comes up. So I've been saying we should double the budget of the National Science Foundation, that we should have, much more investment. It has a paltry $8 billion budget. It ought to be $100 billion. I think the Biden administration is actually beginning to explore ways to vastly increase that level of funding. But I'd love to get a snapshot, because I'm sure who is playing in this space of research globally. How do we stack up? And do we need more resources devoted to this kind of science than we've been giving it right now?
Yeah, that's a fair question. There are some countries that fund more research in building energy efficiency than we do. Our budgets have been strong, and I want to also give a shout out to the states, the California Energy Commission, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So NYSERDA and the CEC are leaders at the state level. The federal government does a lot of research in basic science, in physics and chemistry and biology, and then in these applied areas, in solar or in buildings or in vehicles. Those budgets will be growing to help advance technology into the marketplace, and that does require partnering with industry. Sometimes we do cooperative agreements with industry, and we co-fund work. And yes, we have a lot of things to bring to the market. So we also want to spend money on that deployment side, and it's possible that the infrastructure and things like that will make investments that will allow some of these things to be brought up at some scale. So we do think there's opportunities for more research. There are universities across the country doing more in this space. Having gone to engineering school decades ago, and now their students are super interested in getting involved in these careers, and the workforce requirements are super important also, that working with community colleges and the labor market and the unions to try to actually create all the good jobs to bring these technologies into the market. And that's a really important part of the strategy to accelerate what we're both talking about today is the workforce.
Absolutely.
Let me just ask you both real quick. We have an audience question too, but I've got in a short while Mahesh Ramanujam, excuse me, Mahesh. I've talked with him before. I love talking to him. He's presidency of the U.S. Green Building Council, very involved with, LEED buildings, LEED certified communities, et cetera. Is the ecosystem that you folks are in, from BlocPower to the labs, is there enough show and tell going on? Is there a good, robust set of interactions so that what green building is doing is influenced by what you're learning in the field. So I know it's a big general question, but I'm just wondering if communication's where it should be. Donnel?
Yeah, Mahesh is a great leader at USGBC, and we love the fact that they're starting to move or increase their prioritization of serving buildings of all kinds, including low-income buildings. They've done such a great job with buildings who have sustainability directors and can go through the LEED certification process, and now are thinking through a framework of, well, how do you continue to push building sustainability down to broader and broader, more and more into the mass market. There does need to be more communications. I love the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert Downey Jr. Are, vocal, leading the conversation about the need for sustainability, to the extent that we can continue to raise the profile of sustainability and have it not be something that's like, way out there, that only rich people can access, but something that's for all Americans and that's tied to the future of our economy. And as Dr. Mary Ann suggested, tied to the future of our workforce and putting living wages in people's pockets so that they can feed their kids and pay their own mortgages. I think as we reach that mass market adoption, there does need to be an increased focus on communication from a mass market standpoint in our industry. And that's an important element of what's happening here. But I think that President Biden is leading from the White House on this, and that they're doing a great job so far.
Mary Ann, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so U.S. Department of Energy runs something called the Better Buildings Program. And they have a series of resources and webinars and conferences to try to get the word out on opportunities. And that program is growing. And we do want to work with the professional organizations across the country. We could always do more. And we know that the urgency of the speed and scale of the climate agenda is very important to make these investments in both the research, to have a pipeline of technology, from the science agenda to the deployment agenda, and have a clear set of the way those things interact and the feedback in the field on what's working to improve the next round of technology. So we want to have an engaged ecosystem of collaborators and continue to grow. In fact, all those Zoom sort of communications we're doing is helping people be able to listen from their home and get used to reaching out to conferences and activities that they may not have before. So we are finding new ways to communicate. And I'm very excited about the growing opportunities in this field, because this field is actually growing tremendously.
It'd be great, Mary Ann. You go viral, you take one of those guitars down off the wall and sing a song about green buildings. Yeah. That would be a good next time we're on a Zoom.
We'll do that on the next show. We'll do that on the next show. Yeah. Hey, we've got a question for you folks from Sadie McKeon. Sadie?
Hi, my name is Sadie McEwen. I'm an Executive Vice President of the Community Preservation Corporation in New York. We're an affordable housing lender. We're really excited that the Build Back Better plan calls for a 4-fold increase in the production of affordable housing. That's awesome. My question is, how do we ensure that every one of those units is built to a carbon neutral standard relying on renewable energy? Thank you.
If I can get very fast snapshots, as we're really running out of time, but I think it's an important question. Donnel?
I yield my time to Mary Ann.
Okay, Mary Ann, carbon neutral standard relying on renewable energy. I'm sure you've got the answer.
Well, the question relates to codes and standards.
Right.
And they're around. We actually have different requirements in different states. So you want to continue to push hard on all the states to take advantage, because when you build the building, that's the best time to make those investments, because the life cycle of that building is going to be where those investments in the energy efficiency make sense. And we need to have carbon in those standards because they've been energy based. So we're making this transition to not just looking at the energy efficiency of the building, but the carbon footprint of the building. And that's actually some new science for us.
I don't think that we should be financing affordable housing unless there is carbon neutrality. So I think if you want government financing for low income housing or any housing, it needs to be sustainable housing. And I think that's where we need to be.
Well, great conversation. Donnel, I can tell you got a flair for marketing. I love the guitar idea. I loved hearing about the thin triple, which I think ought to get its own hashtag. I want to thank you both very much. Donnel Baird, CEO of BlocPower. We're going to be looking for great things from you. And Mary Ann Piette, Senior Scientist and Director of Building Technology and Urban Systems at the great Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Thank you both for joining us today.
Good to see you both.